for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumine, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone and welcome. In this simple, humble video, I would like to talk about the nature of different levels of Christhood and how we all intimately and uniquely experience different aspects of attaining the Christ eventually, which is the absolute totality of all that is love, this cosmic Christ that we know as the essence, the heart of what we sometimes call the heart of God. I want to give some references to different levels of how we actually experience this. And I don't want to reference them in a linear fashion, like this is the way progress is made evolutionary for different aspects of our soul being as it walks through all of these experiences. Because in truth, the spiral of creation implies a natural sense of organic evolution. This is not a linear sense. Only as humans, through the mental concept, we sometimes like to put things in these linear box and brackets. So I want to talk about it just from different examples, and then you can see how we each hold aspects there that are playing out regardless of what level of evolutionary experience of the Christ this belongs to. So I want you to be aware of that. The reason why I'm talking about this is to bring you a bigger picture of how it's all just a natural state of evolution. Like each soul being is exactly where it needs to be, where it chooses to be, and it's all within the domain of the free will, the sovereignty of all life and creation. So if any of that is not yet fully understood within us, we are still having problems with controlling through our ego and feeling separate from the rest. And sometimes people express that in trying to think their way is better or more advanced. But in truth, it's just about having a different perspective of, walking into the path of the Christ, because every soul being ultimately and eventually is on the path of Christhood, because it's what we're born from or born within. We're living all in the dream of the cosmic Christ, or we are the dream creation of the cosmic Christ. So in that regard, the way we experience our connection to source, to prime creator, or mother, father, God, whatever you call it, just the spark of life that is the primordial spark of life before all created beings came into being in different levels of soul evolutionary types and cycles. And because of that, the most profound awareness in our awakening comes from the realization that this is not something outside of us, but we're all living within its creation, within its dream. So I want to give some references to different aspects and levels of people on their path, or individuals who are learning about themselves through different aspects. Sometimes it is religion, sometimes it's just the way they live their life, sometimes it's the way they create things themselves. But the first thing I want to mention is, beyond any of what I'm going to be sharing about, we have to come into awareness that there isn't any deeper sense of Christhood than our inner experience of that divinity, which comes through the love, because the heart of creativity is the heart of love, or vice versa. So whenever we do something or we pursue the attainment of what we call the Christ through a rigid perspective, something that stifles our creativity, we will eventually wake up to the fact that this perhaps is not the way that is freedom. It's a liberating pathway. So all of these pathways that I will mention per se hold an aspect of truth, as always. But perhaps within the way that is being experienced, there's not a full liberation. There's not a full, breathable, expanded sense in the way we just experience life. Life is full freedom to create, not just to believe in God and obey God like many religions teach, but be one with God, co-create with this divine spark of cosmic Christ or Christos. So this is this pure crystalline consciousness. That's why the resounding name is similar: Christos, crystal, Christ. is that crystalline pure consciousness that originates life at its primordial state, or this immaculate design or conception, which is in many cases often misinterpreted or misunderstood by many of the following traditions or scriptures. So I'm going to start giving a few examples and how they are on their pathway. So one example would be someone who is so deeply religious that they almost become obsessed with worship. In many cases, these are people who we call religious fanatics, and they would do even different things, or all for the cause of serving God, even if that goes against the very principles of life that we all understand naturally that this is not something you do. And it's not because it's in the 10 Commandments or so. It's just once you are awake within yourself, within your own presence of this Christ nature, you just naturally know this, because you're one with what we call source or God, or the primordial spark of life. So whenever someone experiences their path to Christhood this way, they are actually acting out of fear, like very much on the outside manifestation of fear. It's a very radical fear. It's fear expressed. And because they have this sense of fearing God, they need to worship God. And this has been a belief incepted into the mind structures of humanity for a long time. And those souls who still live on very low vibrational frequencies that are very much operating through fear, they will quickly become susceptible to these indoctrinations. And yet even that holds for them an experience. So that's something not to be judged. Another aspect would be someone that we know these beings as Christians, right? Christians hold a lot of faith. I'm not one of them, so obviously I don't know the entire faith, but I've been doing lots of research because I'm very much an open person. I want to understand and, just explore everything without a sense of judgment. I just want to see, what's out there and what sort of, how people are tuning through their path and what the majority levels of where people are kind of are. But at this level of knowing this, we have to be aware that only the divine spark knows this. It would be very inappropriate or unwise or even untrue for us to say, well, there's so many percent of atheists, so many percent of Christians, so many percent of other religions or fanatics or controlling people, Illuminati, all of this, leading all the way to people who are on the path of becoming their own inner lumen beings. So there is no way of telling here on the human level. This is the foresight that only the great divine eye, the eye that sees it all, has. So it's not for us to even think about. So going back to the so-called Christians, I was exploring this a lot, and Christians have a lot of structure. They're very structured in the way they connect to divinity, and their solemn aim is to very much follow the Bible, the scripture written in the Bible, because the basics of how a Christian is supposed to live, right, is according to those 10 Commandments, following the Bible, studying the Bible, going to church. In their perception, it's very much in the Bible that you have to become a part of a certain church and to be and hold that in a sense of community. And their belief, as you know, is in Jesus and the teachings of Jesus Christ, that also became, some of the writings have been sort of revealed in what we call the scripture known as Revelation, and many different prophets. And so in their belief, it's the God, I believe, that writes the Bible. But in truth, there's intermediaries. So in truth, men always, in this physical sense, in this dimension, men write words. Men write scriptures according to divine inspiration that comes upon them. And even though many of those were pure at the beginning stages, we also know there was a lot of infiltrations from, all the way from dark priesthood to religion that was supposed to control and oppress, that later became, all that was unfolding in Rome and Roman Catholic Church and papistry. So they kind of put themselves in between people and source. So you have to go to them to repent, and to confess your sins. So that's kind of like where the interference came from, and making people believe that they're just petty little humans who, they're just sinners and that's all there is. So in the Christian tradition, because they're so solemnly believe that God wrote the Bible through these prophets, they sometimes become rigid in a way that they only study that. So what I'm noticing in a lot of these people who they might hold a lot of knowledge, I've came across some interesting videos in the way Christians describe certain things, let's say about Lucifer, the fallen angels, how the devil works according to them, the way it operates to make confusion, create confusion in our minds, sort of the way it wants to kind of have us believe that divine plan and God is wrong, so we wouldn't believe in it, so we wouldn't hold our faith. So a lot of these things are very correct, but the aspect that just feels kind of still enclosed in a bubble is that they become rigid with their teachings, and a lot of their belief is about Jesus returning, like physically, and instead of recognizing that as a higher, broader perspective of ascension and us moving towards physical ascension as divine humans, they're still reading that in a bit of a limited concept. So I recently came across this video about who truly is the Antichrist, and someone calculated it so perfectly, and with the numbers, and all the interpretations within the scripture and the Bible. And it came out to be that the Antichrist is truly the Roman Catholic Church in terms of papistry, because the Pope is, and we all know what's happening in Vatican, right? And how the tiniest or smallest country in the world is actually the biggest controller. And how now in the false pretense it wants to unify all religions, but it's truly, again, another false prophecy and false promise that's also written in the Bible, according to them. So I don't know, because I've never read it, never had to, because for me, it's very natural to live this life. I don't need to know 10 Commandments in order to know what's right and just, because it's my own illumined nature. However, there's stages, like I said, of human development and learning to trust their own inner sovereignty. So what I was tuning into and asking my own sense of neutral observation about this level of the way they connect to Christ. So they're calling themselves Christians, which is not the same as being in Christ. It's like being a Christ being, because their belief is that Jesus will come one day and it's going to save them all. So Jesus will create an opening and they're going to be taken into this new world, or, new earth. And because of that, they need to keep a very steady flow of what they do, how they live, in order to get there, because that's their faith. It's like, you live this way. Christians need to live this kind of life in this kind of way to follow this and what's in the tradition, in the Bible, no other scriptures. And in a way, it also keeps you rigid, because you think that's all there is. You think that the universal structure of life can be put in one book. No way, Creator of life wants us to, every soul individual being, it wants us to, it has a desire for each being wants to attain godlike consciousness, which is the attainment of the inner Christos. But like I said, there's many stages for beings to come that way, to fully learn to trust themselves, because on their pathway, many souls, of course, they begin to experiment with experiences. Sometimes they do things that, they think they're bad or wrong. So they're going to jump to another, let's say, totally opposite perspective, right? Sometimes it's very much extreme, jumping from one to the other. But what I sense in this Christian tradition, even though there's a lot of truth there, they know a lot of things, but it's still a limited perspective. And there's a lot of stifling of our inner creativity, which is actually a doorway towards knowing the heart of the Christ. And all you have to do is follow these lines, and eventually your whole life becomes very monotonous. It's just this and that. Follow the study the Bible, be a good Christian, go to your church, just this, live your life in a normal human way, but with this full devotion to this. And again, it creates another bubble. There's a lack of creativity, a lack of diversity, because that's in truth what the Christ is. It's love. It's this pure love, the purest love you can know. And the ability to bring it into the human form is connected directly with allowing yourself to create, not in order to go against what we call our free will. And this is what I'm going to be talking about the next level, which is probably those we call atheists. And atheists are not necessarily people who we say they don't believe in God at all. They absolutely deny it. Some of them are maybe even scientists, or they're very analytical, and they don't believe in anything like the otherworldly power, the power that holds all life together. Not at all. They're even people who they know there's some things out there. They might even use the word God, but they don't put any intention to it in their daily lives. So they're just living their lives, creating their best material reality they can, focusing on their life, their reality, their spouses, their children. It's just the status quo. And even these people are, in a way, intuitively feeling through their soul that at this time what they need the experience. Like Christians, let's say, these are the souls who would feel they need a lot of discipline in their life. And that's what they're learning. That's what their soul is learning at that time. Because maybe in other lifetimes, they were pursuing pathways that, kind of misled them. So in this path, they want to be more rigid and more firm. And this is how they get disciplined. But even a Christian has to be very, very discerning when it comes to stifling the own self. Because what I'm noticing is, like I say, there's a lot of preaching on things that sound good, a lot of this dark light. Yeah, that's what's happening. But it's not from this highest perspective yet. And it doesn't implement the fact that we are Christ ourselves, because it always talks about Jesus as the Son of God and the only Son of God, and that's it. And then there's humans who are going to follow through with where Jesus is taking them, instead of realizing that the inner child, this divine child that is the creation of source, equally upon or unto anything, is equal again. And that was one of the teachings of Jesus that was covered up and was hidden. And it was later orchestrated that it comes to be that he's above, and he was just one of the beings who was an illumined being. And that's what he came to present, that he was one of the volunteering illumined beings who came at that particular timeline, at the 0 point vortex that opened up a new space and a new era to begin at that time. He was the avatar of illumined union for the Piscean age. So, it is really important for us to understand that however something can serve us at a certain point, once we grow out of it, it will also become stifling for our growth and expansion. And you can't grow into becoming cosmic Christ yourself, not just the Christian who follows the path of Christ, but your own inborn, self-born Christ being. And you don't become that if you don't demonstrate your own higher will. It's not like you're afraid of using your own free will, because what if it comes out against you? Sorry, there's an evil fly flying here in my camera. And it's almost like I'm feeling there's a lot of, because there's so much focus on the light, there's a lot of repression of working with the shadow. And I know they talk about the devil, but at the same time, it's again from this level of just don't let it conquer you, be focused on the light, be focused on this and that. And yet, when you're in the path of becoming the cosmic Christ yourself, you're not afraid of these forces. You're not afraid of the dark side. I don't call it the devil. I simply call it the dark side, that which has turned away from the cosmic Christ. And it also plays a role. It demonstrates something very important on this evolutionary sphere of all the souls having their experiences here in this melting pot of unity. And so on this level, I'm feeling these beings are not yet learning to work within their own shadow. They're very much focused on the light, which goes similar in a different fashion, but there's a similarity within what we call the New Age movement, because the New Age movement, again, is another level which opens you up to multidimensionality and all this, and there's other beings, and life is so brilliant. But at the same time, there is a danger to coming to this almost like overbearing quality, over glamorizing, over grandizing of the experience of why you're truly here. And it's almost like becoming or thinking you're something when you're not yet that. Almost like, in the New Age, they always talk about, we're going to have 12 activated chakric system and this and that in the physical sense, and it's just going to happen at this time, and we're going to shift into these new bodies. And it's almost like it's not taking into account the reality of how things are in this density. It's almost like you're trying to live multidimensionality without taking a regard, without putting in regard or regarding this, what we call the dimensionality that is here, the density that we feel, that we exist in, that our bodies now exist, and understand that there's a gradual process to this, and that our physiology responds to our consciousness. And you don't just turn the light on and then you fuse your own body, and this is how it happens. So there's a lot of false beliefs because they come from this overgrandizing the experience, and there's like a denial of where you are now, because again, there's a lot of repression of this where we are now, because the New Agers don't want to face the fear and the pain that the collective is feeling and experiencing, and it's almost like wanting to bypass the experiential nature of what gets us onto the other side, of what gets us into the breakthrough. It's like blossoming into this Christ nature, which is a challenging journey. And it's like they want to just fast forward into this reality that is not created yet. And those are some of the pitfalls of the New Age, as well as not realizing and seeing the false prophets, because you have to know, once you become very infatuated with something without being grounded and firm, discerning, like absolute discernment, you will quickly fail to notice those beings and influences that want to harm you and go against you, and they will use your naivety. I'm not a New Ager, but I myself, I had to see where I hold, well, my being holds aspects to connect into that reality that is not yet fully matured consciousness. There's still a little bit of that. It's almost like a teenager, you know? You know, when you're a teenager, I always have this thought in my head, and it's not a judgment. It's just, you know, I see reality very neutrally, but it is what it is. You can't go against it. It's just different levels and stages of growth. But there was this sentence that was once played in my mind, which was, New Agers are like teenagers. You know, when you're a teenager and you're 18 or 19, you're like, I know it all. But you don't. You think that way because you come into the first stages of maturation, and yet it's just beginning. Life still has much to teach you, and you have much to learn from life. It's like, you know, it's the refinery, it's the distillery of this work that gets you into the next level. Yeah, so the next level is a lot of people who, I would say, they're very much studying the esoteric teachings, the metaphysical teachings. In many cases, they call themselves mystics. They can even be tarot people who are exploring reality through more a sense of magic. And they're learning that there's more to life, and they're seeing the mystical components of life. And it's very good, because this is the pathway once you start learning about the mystical nature of source, while at the same time doing your random day-to-day activities, you know, like many masters and gurus are teaching us this pathway. But in many cases, the detriment of this path can be becoming more vertical than horizontal. Like, it can sometimes prevent us from living life again in a grounded sense, because we get too wide. We're just interested in the way things function in source, and all we want to do is meditate, and it's explore the nature of esoterics and these teachings. And there's a lot. If you want to study everything, you can study your whole life and beyond, like lifetimes. And again, the focus here will not necessarily again be bringing this sense of Christhood into your experience here now, into this body, into this human child, this human counterpart. And that's why the last level of Christhood, I'm not going to say last, but the closest that we can get to that being embodied in our human sense and our human level, is when you are aware of your I am presence. Because when I look into the Christians, it's almost like no one's talking about their I am presence. It's all just Jesus the Christ and God, and the devil, and then them, right? Needing to do the work in order to get onto the other side and be saved or rescued. Sometimes the New Agers will be, you know, waiting for ET or extraterrestrial ships to rescue them. And again, what's the difference, right? It's still a sense of looking outside of you, not really mastering your life force within this body, and understanding the divine trinity of life and source and how it all functions as above, so below. As above, so below principle doesn't necessarily mean that everything that you feel in your purity will be directly reflected in this plane of being. Naturally, we live in this matrix still, and a reality is not a direct manifestation. It's not an instant manifestation of what we are. There's lagging behind, there's linearity, there's confusion, there's manipulation, there's constant need to distort a reality. It's how it is. So it's a challenging path because of that. But as above principle truly means that you're working towards that. And if that is your state and spirit, if you become illumined in your awareness, it will eventually translate into what you're experiencing. Not necessarily you're going to get all the rags and riches and it's all going to be yours instantly, but you will be able to be in this consciousness fully not just in certain moments when you have happy glimpses of what it is to be in this cosmic bliss, but that you are working towards it. So this, what I call this last level of Christ, is not just being a Christian, or like being a good Christian, what they call, but it is truly the nature of your own Christ. You might adore and admire other beings, other fellow masters, but you are aware that the universe is vast. There is not only one Son of God. All essences in life are children of the divine, and they're offspring, they're extensions of it all. And because of that, we don't need to ask God, like pleading with it and begging it to fulfill the desires like many masters have been teaching before. Ask for it. Not like demanding it in this self-righteous kind of way, but just ask in the sense that I am the divine source. And again, when someone is not developed enough in their own soul maturity, they might mistake that for, oh, I'm God, I can do anything. That again leads into pride, and that is a Luciferian trait. Pride. You know how the story of the fall of Lucifer, he was one of the most beautiful creation angels, and then it was pride of his self, reflection, and this vanity and desire to be more than God himself and be beyond him and work on its own, that led him to this fall. So when he fell, he was no longer within domain of those beings, not because we say, well, God has excluded him from what we call the celestial realms and the workings of creation angels, but because it was his own choice, truly. Because once you kind of go away, even as humans, once we sometimes eliminate ourselves from society or something, it's our own choice. Sometimes it's because it's positive for us, we don't want to be a part of something that's negative, and that's our choice. And sometimes it's more a trait, when we're kind of hiding from the world and we do like this, and again, it's our own choice. Either way, it is always our sovereign choice. So this last step of Christhood is embracing the nature of our own Christ, becoming the embodiment of I am Christ. Just like other fellow cosmic beings who've taken this journey before, and some many times, not just once, everyone is not following those footsteps, but creating their own pathway of this Christhood. So in this path, we're not rigidly worshiping something or thinking we need to act a certain way, otherwise it's not going to happen for us. But we know intrinsically that when we are awake, if we're truly awake, this will all be inborn. These higher sense of what's right, what's divine, and what's not will come to us naturally, organically, without us needing to be disciplined in that way. But because it is a cycle of growth for some soul beings, it is necessary for them to learn this way. It's been like that for eons of time. Even in school, right? You have your training, but then you want to break free and decide what you want to do. The training is just the basic level. It's just training ground. And the rest is like the world is your oyster, because that's how it's supposed to be. And whenever we feel a sense of rigidity and entrapment, it means we've outgrown something. Come on, you evil fly. Go away. And so when we feel that, it will be on us to make the change. So, yes, it is what it is. And this path of inner Christhood, like I said, it doesn't mean now when you come to this level of your soul evolution and you start growing towards it, it's just you decide it and then you just are this. No, a lot of things in our human lives need to align for us to truly bring our human form with it. That's what physical ascension means. You're like bringing the human with you. What we sometimes call the densest aspect of creation, like the most fallen aspect. But in truth, we were convinced so long that it is fallen. And yet the heart of the human was always created through the heart of God. It has the same resonance of what we call as above, so below, or in his likeness, in the image in his or her, right? Because it is one source. And so once we remember that, it becomes much easier for us to recognize that it's not something we necessarily connect to. It's something we are. And that's why it takes a while for humanity to learn to not see divinity as something outside of us. Whatever kind of form we give it. In some cases we give it a form of being ET ships or ET beings because they're just more advanced, and humanity has fallen for these tricks before. That's what they called false prophets gods, and they weren't really gods. They're just beings at different levels of vibration and vibration living. And so that happens when you're not fully aware, and you're not aware that you are already what we call the Christ. And that was the teaching of Jesus. That was original teaching. That's what he said. All the things I can do, you can all do as well. He didn't say when you follow me. He said when you are as me, but not me, because everyone has, again, an individual spark. And that's where divine creativity comes from. And that is why it is so important to be one with your own source of creativity. Whenever we feel a sense of our inner spark kind of being diminished, it's like we're not honoring the heart of God. Because when you honor your creativity, you actually honor the heart of the divine creator. It wants you to thrive in your creativity. And whether in your particular cycle you're choosing that to be tarot readings, doing, shuffling cards all day, that's what Source is experiencing through you, and that's what you feel it brings you joy. And where that is demonstrating a path or teaching something, that's that. And whether that's going to church every day, then that's that. It's just what it is. But what I'm saying here, we need to see the unity of all of these aspects, because we still see with our eyes of separation. We don't see things as like Source sees it. Well, it's just different levels of coming back home into the original nature of what cosmic Christ means. And that there wouldn't be this vast creativity and this universal structure of, look at how many galaxies, look at just the beauty of the universes, right? That doesn't come without creativity. That doesn't come just by law. Laws themselves are important because that's how things can be sustained and maintained. But the most important quality is the feminine aspect of Source, is this divine creativity. And that's where a lot of these religion-based doctrines of the way you connect to Source instead of just being Source, they're just seeing God always as the Father. And it's all connected to the law and obeying, which is still, it's important, but it's still rigid because it presents only one aspect. It's not yet Source in all of its traits, because Source, for me, the most easiest way to present it would be the Trinity of 3 circles. And so in this last stage of becoming the Christ, being ourselves, we will have to honor our body, our physicality, our own inner Christ in the making, because it is the divine child. Physicality is that which will be the vessel for spirit. And that's the highest law and order in that sense for me, once you understand that. And that's the trait of illumined beings. They're no longer connecting to Source. They are Source. They have an inborn sense of what's just, what is the essence of Christ. They have these laws of commandments, like it's in their heart. It's in their sacred flame. It's not something that's a teaching as outside of them. And they know how to walk as one, and how to serve as one, and how to demonstrate. So basically that would be it. As you know, I have a Cosmic Christ course in the making, because I was a bit taken back in my own timeline. There was many intrusions and distractions and things that came in between that made it all perfect, and divine timing as always. So when that is available, I'll let you know. Until then, in the meantime, I have so much content on my page called Ascension on Patreon. There's just vast reservoir of tuning into this higher intelligence and demonstrating through my own experience as well, and so much content. So you're always welcome. The door is always open, and I'll see you on the other side. As always, so much love, wisdom, and power, and nurture your own inner Christ flame in whatever way that best suits you, unapologetically, through love. Enjoy.